First of all, when we raise the term karma or rebirth, there are multiple and various positions are in discussion in the public thought of it. The very idea of rebirth seems to be an issue that is in discussion in many cultures, not only in the Indian culture or the Asian culture per se, or the Buddhist culture, which is now in different parts of the world, which includes present-day China and Japan, a major part of the East Asian countries. But what exactly is the idea of rebirth? Primarily, it's the belief that people would not die when they are actually dying, but they are actually transforming from this body, which they leave behind, to another body, which somewhere is getting ready for the soul, which is transmigrated. That's the idea. The belief very clearly says a person is not actually ending with his death, but it's something like changing the dress. It goes on continuing in different bodies. And this terminology of changing the cloth, as an example, was not mine, in fact. That is from Bhagavad-Gita. One of the major religious texts in India speaks about rebirth, where Krishna, the person who is speaking mainly in Bhagavad-Gita and giving the opinions and commands to the person in doubt, that is Arjuna, he says that, if you win the war, you get the kingdom. If you lose the war, well, if you die, but there are two stories in Bhagavad-Gita. One says you would go to the hero's heaven. In another part of the Bhagavad-Gita, it says that, well, what is there to be afraid of death? If you die, it's just like changing the clothes. Your soul will transmigrate to another soul and you would continue. There is no death. That's the idea that is given in Bhagavad-Gita about rebirth. But one would think, Bhagavad-Gita, as all legitimate understanding about the period of Bhagavad-Gita, one would say that it is something like 2 to 3rd century of CE, the Common Era, that Bhagavad-Gita was written. The kind of language that is used very clearly ascertain that the period is around 2 to 3 century. So when Bhagavad-Gita mentions about rebirth, one comes with a very easy question. Well, then it must be an Indian idea. It's the part of the Indian faith system. What's the basis of Indian faith system? Many people say that the faith system in India, the Indian Brahmanic or Vedic culture begins from the Vedas. There are 4 main Vedas, which are known as the Veda Samhita, the basic text of Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda. And written in a span of around 2000 plus years, or these were hymns recited by people as part of their rituals, appealing the gods of those times to get whatever they wish. All their major wishes were expressed in the Vedas, all their major wishes. And what were the wishes? One could see that they wanted better children. They wanted better harvest. There were special sacrifices made for whatever they wanted. And there were special fire rituals meant for getting more rain, good weather, more power, more sexual power, victory over the enemy. A lot of things are there in the wish list of the hymns and prayers of Bhagavad Gita. But you don't see a single hymn in Rig Veda, except a casual mention, which some people would say in the 10th part of Rig Veda, which many people would say is interpolated. But there's a casual mention that about the lives, continuing lives or something like that. But there is no single hymn in the Rig Veda or Samaveda which would be seeking for a better rebirth. There is no mentioning about rebirth practically in any of these Vedas, which means during the time of Vedas, which is apparently, the period could be 1500 BCE to something like 500, 600 CE, if that's the period, or even if some people would say even before that, around 2000 BCE, if one takes it that way, you don't see any mentioning of the idea of rebirth or any special prayer made for having a better birth in the Rig Veda. The Rig Vedas would speak about all other things that they wanted, a lot of things that they wish to have. But come on, there is nothing about a better life after this death. Then where did it come from? Then you see in Bhagavad-Gita, which was apparently written around 200 to 300 CE, the Common Era. I would say CE and BCE, not AD and BC, mainly because I don't think a time calculation based on a fictitious character, namely Jesus Christ, would be appropriate. And as universally it is accepted now by Britannica and Wikipedia and everybody, would be following now the classical suggestion made by Robert Greene Ingersoll that, well, it's very popular because of the imperial colonies. This era calculation is very much there. Therefore, we all accept it. There is no problem. But we change the name. It is before Common Era, not before Christ, but before Common Era, BCE. And instead of Anno Domini AD, we would say CE, Common Era. So that's why, if some people has a confusion with what I say about CE and BCE, that's what it means. So CE 200 to 300 is the time of Bhagavad-Gita. The original form of Mahabharata was known as Jaya. So it's a long period wherein Mahabharata in the present context has been codified, which included several different poems, stories, and several different hymns and ideas that people had, which were all collected over the time. And the Mahabharata was evolving over time. But you don't see Bhagavad-Gita in any of the earlier versions of Mahabharata. It was apparently added in the 2nd century or 3rd century. That's very important. This period is very important because all the linguistic experts of all times would very clearly identify the period of the language that was used in Bhagavad-Gita. That could be between 200 to 300 CE. Before that, one sees the Sramanika religions in India. There was a decline of the Vedic culture. And on parallel to it, another set of belief emerges in India that is generally called the Sramanika religions. That includes the present-day Buddhism, Jainism, and another religion which is no more existing now, which is known as the Ajivaka religion. Ajivaka religion almost totally perished in history. So all these faiths, as well as the later Hindu texts, speak about rebirth. Rebirth is an idea not only in Hinduism, as many people would say. It's an idea which is available in Buddhism, Jainism, Ajivaka cult, and to an extent, the Tao belief, and even Falun Gong people in China would believe a kind of rebirth. Shintoism partly, speak about rebirth in a different form of it. But every single thing in the Sramanika religions or the Eastern or Oriental religions that we see, the idea can be connected with one small point of history. And that's one of the major points I'm trying to make in this meeting. That point is the invasion of Alexander into India. Alexander invaded India sometime before the beginning of the CE. And why did Alexander invade all these places? He was coming from Macedonia, which is in the present-day Greece. And he defeated a major part of the then world. Persia, he was under his control, and he came to India. And it was at that time his soldiers wanted to go back and they didn't further proceed forward. And they left behind a lot of people along with them, scholars and special ambassadors and military representatives to continue what they wanted to establish in the last destination that they had, that was India. And what was the special message? Everything in connection with Alexander speaks about the Hellenic culture he was fascinated with. Hellenic culture was something Alexander thought was the greatest culture of those times. That was a universal, greatest culture, which he thought should be spread all around the world. That's his holy duty. That was Alexander's thought. And it was not for decorating like many other warmongers would do. No, he didn't do anything of that sort. He didn't establish even the empire to that extent, but he controlled many parts of the world before going back, and on the return back, he dies. But the mission was to spread the ideas of the Hellenic culture, which he thought was a very superior culture, and the world deserves to know what is the Hellenic culture, the culture of Greece. The great idea of Greece. Yes, Greece was a great center of a lot of ideas. The idea of republic comes from Greece. The idea of a kind of a parliament, the Senate, representatives of the people being elected, that comes from Greece. All these ideas came from Greece. That's all part of the Hellenic culture. We know about Socrates, Plato, of Aristotle, great scholars of one time. Of this series, Aristotle was in Macedonia. He was hired by Alexander's father, Philip, the king, to educate Alexander as a young man. King Philip thought his son Alexander should grow up into a global figure and go around the world and spread the great culture of Macedonia. Therefore, he wanted the greatest scholar of those times to teach his son. So did he. And Aristotle was brought as a teacher of Alexander. So it was Aristotle who was directly in charge of educating Emperor Alexander in his childhood. And that's the key of the whole thing. Alexander was the first person that we know who spoke about rebirth. Aristotle spoke about, he wanted to have an explanation, philosophical explanation for the misery of people and for which he could not understand what was the reason. People were in misery. They had sometimes blind people were born. People were in hunger sometimes. People were in illness sometimes. He could not understand. He thought everything has a logical connection with each other. But he could not understand what was the reason or what could be the reason behind the misery of people. So he tried to make a kind of a hypothesis, apparently coming from the ideas from the previous cultures that was prevalent, the Assyrian culture and Babylonian culture, and all these cultures were having different and crude ideas about the other worlds and people going there and living, and all these kind of things were existing. You know that Tammuz has been going to the underworld and returning back, and the heroes of the war were all living in a happy heaven there. But that was not up, but down somewhere. So all these stories were existing. All this mythology in different forms were existing earlier, but no specific idea about a rebirth. Some crude thoughts some people had, but not specifically as Aristotle thought. Aristotle said, I could only find one reason that can explain the present day misery. That could be a previous birth that we all had. And we did something wrong there. And that's why people are punished in this life. If we do good in this life, perhaps we would get a better life in the next life. Look at the argument. He was trying to find a logical justification for moral living, or a qualitative life which is obeying the law, obeying the system, and following what is considered right, because you would get a better life if you follow all these kind of things. And you have misery now because you had something, you have done something wrong in the previous life. This is what Aristotle came into. He got into this conclusion and he gave this idea to Alexander. Alexander believed that correct. Also, one has to understand one more situation of those times. There was no idea of a big god like Semitic religions would believe at that time. Greeks believed that their emperor was the god, the representative of Jupiter. So they considered themselves to be the representative of the god. How do you explain that process? There is a god, Jupiter or Zeus or other gods there. Most of the Roman gods also have their own forms in the Greek mythology. Zeus was the father god, and his son was Prometheus. And it was Prometheus who gave us fire. I mean, it's a very rich mythology. It's very rich like the Indian mythology. But part of it is the emperor himself is a human personification of the god. We find any similarity of the whole thing. India, where the Vedas were the prevalent faith system, do not speak about any incarnation, that gods transform into human beings. These two ideas, that gods transform into human beings and get incarnated as humans, has only one major source that we see in history, and that is the Greek tradition and the Roman tradition. And before Alexander's invasion, these two major belief patterns, that a god can be incarnated into a human being on the earth here, and people would have a rebirth after their death, did not exist anywhere. I speak about it categorically and in clear language, because I also know that some people would say that there is a casual mentioning in the 10th chapter of Rig Veda, which speaks about different lives. There's one casual mentioning there. But also, the 10th chapter is mainly considered by many Vedic scholars themselves that it is an interpolation, mainly because the 10th chapter of which is known as Dashamaskanda, which is a different language, apparently added much later. It speaks about a sacrifice, a human sacrifice is spoken. Nowhere in any part of Vedas you see a human sacrifice. Animals were sacrificed. Animals were sacrificed with a special pattern. They were not put in fire as it was done, or they were not butchered as that was done in the Semitic area. The Indian Vedic sacrifice was closing all the holes of the animal. If it's a lamb, its nose and mouth and ears and rectum and its urinary tract, all will be blocked by several people and held like that for some time. It cannot breathe and it would die. But they believe that when an animal is killed like that, a special kind of soft fat will be formed under its skin, which is known as vapa. That's the technical term that they used. It's a kind of soft layer of fat. So this they extracted from the killed animal. And they believe that this animal could get this layer of soft fat only if it's killed with all the holes of the animal are closed. So the mouth and nose and ears and the rectum as well as the urinary tract would be closed tightly and it cannot get any air and it would die soon. And they will cut open the skin and take out the vapa, which is the soft fat, and offer that fat in the fire to the gods. The gods will be pleased only with that fat. That's what was explained in the Vedas. So they killed animals. After that, they would, cut the animal into several pieces, and each gotra, each tribe of the priests would get different parts of the meat. These all are very clearly defined. Who would get the shoulder meat and who would get the leg meat and who would get the tenderloin, all these kind of things, are explained very clearly in the Vedas. But nowhere an offering was made for a rebirth, for a better rebirth. But Atharvaveda, you can see a lot of rituals and magical words to get free from ailments, black magic, kind of black magic. And all these ailments they considered were provoked by evil spirits, Rakshasas and Pishach. They have a lot of different names. And they were named all these people. And who created the skin ailments, who created your cough, who created your stomach ache, who has, which evil spirit is busy with aborting women, and all these kind of things are narrated there. And you have special magical words or mantras to ward these evil spirits. That is Atharvaveda. It's considered great wisdom, but basically this is all what is in the Vedas, but written in beautiful language, or at that time recited, because there was no writing at that time. Similarly, in different parts of the world, similar literature is there. Saint Avesta, which is again a part of the Aryan tradition, where most of what we consider in India as the devas or the godly people are on the other side in Saint Avesta, which was the sacred text in the then Persian land. Ahrimastu is something like the hero of the Asuras, was the god there. And Ahrimastu has a raised tail and a raised penis, a phallic organ, with a trident. Many people would consider that as the fundamental root of the idea of Shiva. There is another argument that it comes from a southern tradition. There is also a similar phallic worship tradition in southern India, but nowhere here, that's the point I was telling. We see a god getting reincarnated as a human being, or a human being transforming into another person after death. This idea did not exist anywhere. It comes immediately after this period everywhere. In Hindu Puranas, you see this story. In Buddhist traditions, you see this. And in Jainist traditions, you see this. And in Ajivaka tradition, you see this. And Buddhists, of course, when they went off to spread the faith in the far-off lands, they took this idea and gave it to different local religions elsewhere in the eastern part of the world. So the idea I would like to assert, the point that I want to make clear here is, the idea of rebirth is not an Indian idea. It's a Greek idea brought in with Alexander's team. The scholar is brought with Alexander. After that, we have the story absorbed into the Indian tradition. The reincarnation stories of the gods, as well as the rebirth of humans, are coming there. Now, coming to Bhagavad-Gita, we see the story of the karma as the major thing that decides everything. Everybody has to follow his karma, which is What would one mean by the word karma? Karma means action. That's, if you take Sanskrit as the base, which was the language of Bhagavad-Gita, karma, if you take as an independent unit, it means action or duty or responsibility. These are the different meanings of the word karma. But in a religious context, it has a different meaning. That meaning is, that is your karma. Something like what you have done in the previous life is what is going to decide what you are doing here and what's happening in your life in this life. And another part of Bhagavad-Gita speaks about once you die, it's like changing your clothes. The person does not end. The cloth is the body, and you leave the body behind and you have another cloth. That was it. Which means the idea of rebirth in Bhagavad-Gita is an instant one. It's like changing the cloth. You just go into another body. Immediately somewhere you are in the womb of some other mother. But another Indian Purana, which is known as Shiva Purana, which is written some centuries later, you see another story of reincarnation or rebirth, which is taken by a lot of people as the common folk faith in India. What is the common faith in India? People are born as different animals or birds, and they may not necessarily get a rebirth as a human being immediately again. The popular myth at another side is that instantly you are born as a new human being. There are hundreds and hundreds of stories brought up by reincarnation story promoters that people who were born immediately after that. They say that it would take 6 months in incubation, and then after that they are born, and practically within 18 months you are reborn. That's their story. But Shiva Purana, the story of Shiva as per Indian epics, speaks about this exact word in Shiva Purana is Chaurasi lakh yonyon ke baad, means after 64,000 vaginas, you would get a human birth again. That is what Shiva Purana says. So the legend got its own form in India. People are, after your death, you can be born as a dog or a rat or a cat or a bird or a crow. It goes into, you can be anything. You can be a little worm. So you have to go through 64,000, 6,400,000, Chaurasi lakh, 6,400,000. I mean, you have to pass through the birth, 6,400,000 times. You have to go through the vaginas 6,400,000 times, and then only you get a human life again. How many years it would take? The idea would have a different perspective or different way of understanding if you go to Shiva Purana. If you believe in Bhagavad-Gita, you have to reject Shiva Purana. If you believe in Shiva Purana, you have to reject Bhagavad-Gita. So it's a choice of people. People don't go too much into all these details, because if you take the Indian epics or Puranas, you can find stories mutually contradicting everywhere. Who is whose son? There can be 5 different explanations. And who behaves what way? You have so many different versions and stories. Who is a good guy and who is a bad guy? You have so many interesting stories everywhere. It can be compared only with Greek mythology, which is equally rich and equally interesting and equally fascinating. I am very much fascinated with Indian mythology because it's a beautiful, colorful stories of human imagination's wildest possibilities. And for a person who loves myth, it's a harvest area. Well, because I like mythology and I'm interested in mythology and I'm fascinated with the idea of mythology, because mythology is a key to understand the human minds that produced it. That's how I would see it. Well, that's a different case. Now, coming to rebirth and karma. Well, that's one part of the rebirth idea that we all know, that it came from the past. In the Buddhist tradition, it got a different color. It says that samsara, it explains, samsara is the chain of birth that you would go through. And that's a circle, samsara chakra. You have to come, it repeats and repeats like a chakra, like a circle. You have to come out of the samsara chakra and reach the final peaceful position, the moksha. Moksha was not there mainly in the Hindu text. It was a Buddhist idea, but it got absorbed into the Hindu faith also. You can see that most of these faiths in the Indian tradition, they got interlinked. Many ideas from Buddhism were absorbed into the Hindu faith and Jainist faith, and vice versa. And the latest religion, Sikhism, you can see all the Hindu stories there, narrated in a different form, in a different language. So the collective myth of the subcontinent was taken almost by all Oriental religions. I would repeat the Oriental religions once again. The Sanatan Dharma, I would say the post-Vedic period, I would call the new religion that emerged would be Sanatan Dharma. They were not even worshipping in temples at that time, but they were more on the mythology, going in a wild format. And they practically rejected the traditional Vedic structure, and a ritualistic new Hinduism emerged. The name Hinduism was not there. And one could call it Sanatan Dharma to understand it. The word Hindu came much later. So the first stage is the Vedic religion, then the Sanatan Dharma emerges, and it goes on, and it has a lot of challenges, ups and downs. But in the 2nd century, 3rd century, there was an uprising of the Sanatan Dharma against the Sramanika cults, Buddhism, Jainism, and Ajivikas. There was an urge in the Vedic, post-Vedic, what you call the Sanatana culture, to defeat and become the legend of the land for the time. So you see a second uprising, or some people would call it the Brahminic religion, because the authority of the Brahmin was one of the key that follows from the Vedic religion as well as in Sanatan Dharma. What's that connects them? Chaturvarnya. Chaturvarnya was a major idea that came into predominance, especially during this period. And what was Chaturvarnya? Chaturvarnya was an idea coming from the Vedic time, which would speak about the 4 different varnas. It's a kind of classes, social classes, but based on your birth. Varna means color only. The skin color was not really a matter. It had a different meaning, different connotation, because many Brahmins were dark colored as well. In Bihar or in other parts on the eastern part, many Brahmins were dark colored. In southern India, they were in dark color. Varna does not mean they were white color, but it has an importance. Varna means color. And who was the colored people there? Colored in the Western language, if you speak in English or any other language, colored people means the black people. In India, the Varna means Savarna. One has color, means the colorless people, the pale people, the white people. They were called Savarna in Indian culture. Whereas if you speak in Europe or America, the color means the people with African origin or Asian origin. They are the colored people. But in India, Savarna means the colorless people or the fairer people or the pale people. And who were those people? They were the descendants of the Greek people who came here and married the local people and settled down here for a long time. You see, from Afghanistan to Kashmir, great influence of Greek tradition. They were Greek ambassadors for so many decades or so many centuries after that in Kashmir. You can see something as late as 8th century. There are tombs of 8th century of Greek ambassadors who lived in Kashmir. So the connection that started from the time of Alexander continues for almost 600, 700 years that are very clearly seen now. So most of what we have, the idea, apparently, the Varna Dharma means the Dharma is the order, or some people would, in many Northern Indian languages, Dharma means religion. Especially in Hindi and Hindustani, Dharma means religion. In Sanskrit, it would mean the value system. So if you take the meaning as religion, the Sanatan Dharma is the eternal religion, as they used to call it, was the new religion. And it certainly carried the idea of rebirth, reincarnation of gods, and the idea of karma. Then you see, around this period, the Buddhism takes the idea of reincarnation. Jainism takes the idea of reincarnation or rebirth, and it continues. And Jainism, it goes to the extreme position. Jains believed, not like Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita. Krishna says you change your clothes and you become another man. The body is your clothes and you leave it behind and you get another life. But Jainis believed, no, it's not like that. You would be having a new life like a little ant, a little worm, a little insect. You can be anything. It's very close to the Shiva Purana idea of several hundreds of lives that every soul is getting. And it's going from one body to the other in an eternal cycle. That was the belief. So they believe that when you walk in the street, well, if you by mistake walk over a little ant, a little insect, probably that would be your great-grandfather. So therefore, you should be careful in walking. You should be very, very careful. And you should live closer to the nature. There are two schools in Jainist belief system. So many of them would cover their nose and mouth, not because of corona or Omicron or anything. They would have white clothes covering their nose and mouth because they believe that by mistake, if they inhale in a little insect, you are doing a himsa, a violence against maybe some of your ancestors. So you cannot do that. So therefore, you have to protect every single form of life, and therefore, you should not breathe in anything without filtering. You cannot even kill a little insect. So therefore, the Jainists believe that there is reincarnation, there is rebirth, and this rebirth is a continuous process, and you have no choice of becoming what in the next life. And that can be only ascertained by the cyclic way of life that's going on. It's not in your control. Ajivakas believed. Ajivakas were another major sect. They believe that karma has no influence. Imagine, 3 different schools. They believe karma has no influence. It's destiny that decides. Destiny has everything. Everything is pre-decided. A magic order in this universe. Everything is pre-decided. Tomorrow there is a dawn. It's pre-decided. You cannot change it. So the eternal decision-making that was happened someday is continuing. Ajivakas did not believe in a God. And even Jainis did not really believe in a God. And a major part of Buddhism did not believe in God. And you can see another tradition of Hinduism. In Vedanta, there is no God. So one of the major factors that prevails in the Indian tradition is, though it's now turned into a very ritualistic and God-connected faith system, it's a kind of ancient way of natural living without thinking of a creator making something, but some natural order, some kind of laws that exist here. And these laws are the criteria that decide how you have a rebirth and for what sin you would get a next life and what sin would make you aware. All these things are decided. But on the other side, Ajivakas believe that no, there is no rebirth, but it's all destiny. Your karma does not influence you. You cannot do anything. You cannot change anything. You have no will there. Your will is totally surrendered to the destiny's will. So therefore, you don't do anything. If somebody comes and hit you, you don't hit back. Because it was your destiny to get the hitting, you get it. That is one of the reasons for the collapse of the faith system of Ajivakas, because people did not even survive. They didn't have any kind of enthusiasm to do things and become successful and become victorious in their life and achieve things. They just surrendered to nature, surrendered to everything. You can see the same thing goes into the Hindu form of rebirth. Whatever Bhagavad-Gita says, the common folk faith in India is that if there is a famine, if the farm crops are going, what would be the common response of a villager? He would say, well, it's my destiny. Everything is written on my forehead. They believe that was an Ajivaka belief, that everything is written on your forehead and you cannot change it. That was originally an Ajivaka belief. So therefore, you cannot do anything. You cannot change it. You cannot transform things. You cannot win over things because it's all pre-decided. It's destiny. That's the Ajivaka faith, which creeps into other forms of Indian rebirth idea. This was carefully used by the new Sanatan Dharma or the Neo-Brahmanism that emerges in the 2nd, 3rd century. They conveniently used this idea because caste system was developing at this time. There's a huge difference between the idea of Varna, which is mentioned earlier, as and caste system. In Varna, they speak about 4 major Varnas in the society. The Kshatriya, the ruling class, then the Brahmin, the priestly class or the teaching class, then the Vaishyas, who were traders and the owners of the land, and Shudras, who were the workers, servants or service people. And a larger section outside this elite structure were not considered as people. That is how it went on. But caste system was convenient for a lot of people, like slavery was convenient for a lot of people. Caste system made works easier. Works were delegated to people based on their birth, and especially the dirty work and the difficult work were all gone to some people, and they had no escape to come out of it, because that's the social order. The caste system was something you could not break. And when you break caste system, you are breaking the Varna's order. So they link the earlier Varna, which is a godly idea for them, to the caste system. And caste system was stabilized with the fundamental idea of Varna. So one has to understand that caste is not Varna, Varna is not caste, but caste took its credence from Varna. That's how it comes. The idea of, and the fate becomes another idea coming from the Ajivakas, but becomes a stabilizing factor. People were told, it's your fate that you are an untouchable now. You are doing certain work now, but work hard, do your duties, do your karma, and you are only destined to do what is your karma. You cannot break the decided karma upon you. So what is the, you are not, the misery originally coming from Aristotle has turned into something else when it came to India. Here, your profession, your job, your livelihood, whatever you're doing is something you cannot change because that is coming from your karma in the previous life. The whole idea is transformed very trickily into something as a clever exploitation structure. Caste system is one of the most dangerous exploitative structure that exists in the eastern part of the world. It has crept into every part of the Indian faith system. It has gone into every other religion. It has gone into Buddhism, which came against the Vedic culture. It has gone into Jainism. It has even gone into Sikh religion, which came much later. Wherever you came from, your caste decided your identity, which was connected with the Varna order. And if you see Bhagavad-Gita, it clearly says that why this incarnation happens. I hope many of you who are from India here at least would know what is the story of Mahabharata. Mahabharata is a story of a clan war. One local king, Dhritarashtra, I don't want to put in names, to confuse people who do not know the story. One king who would rule the country was blind. Therefore, he cannot rule. He gives the responsibility or delegate the responsibility to his brother Pandu, who would rule for him. Pandu has 5 children, and the blind original king has 100 children. So now the next generation comes up. And who would rule the country? The de facto king's son or the de jure king's sons. That was the serious dispute. So there are efforts, like in any other kingdom, in any other story, to manipulate your victory, to trap the other people. And some people are termed bad people, some people are good people. Then there are people, switching sides, and the godfathers and the kings and the uncles and the teachers and all these kind of people have their own influence. And finally, it all end up into a great war. So there is a character, namely Krishna. Krishna was not a god in many parts of Mahabharata, but he has some special powers. For example, once the common wife of the 5 children of the then king, Pandu, they have a common wife, Draupadi. Draupadi was, there was an effort to publicly humiliate her in the court of the other king. There was a wicked brother of the main king there, and he tries to undress her publicly. So Krishna lends her a long cloth so that they cannot undress her. So there we see a magic power of Krishna there. Later, Krishna emerges, the final war comes, and war has when both sides are on both sides, and then the leader of the Pandavas, the great warrior, and Krishna, who now later we know that he is the reincarnation of God Vishnu himself. Why Vishnu reincarnates? That's explained later. That is to preserve the dharma. The sentence that is used is dharma samsthavanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. From ages to ages, I will happen to re-establish the dharma, the order. And what is the dharma? It's explained in Bhagavad-Gita. The major break of dharma is the break of the order of the varna. People are getting mixed up in marriages. People marry from one varna to the other varna. Therefore, the dharma has declined. That's the only argument he makes. The war, for example, if you know the story of Mahabharata, the war is not for establishing any dharma or anything. It was just for settling the ownership rights or the kingly rights of this kingdom. Who shall prevail as the leader? That was the issue. But Krishna emerges there and Arjuna is puzzled. He cannot kill anybody. He would ask Krishna, take me to the center of this war front. I want to see my uncles and my teachers and my cousins and my brothers on the other side. I cannot kill them. I am shaking. I cannot kill them. He was a pacifist. The God's incarnation, he says that, come on, you have to kill them. That's your karma. again this idea comes. So you have to do your duty. You cannot go away from that. So it's a 700 stanzas. And if one takes one stanza in a minute, it would take something like 11 hours and 7 minutes to recite the whole thing. So if it started in the morning at 6 o'clock, it would end up something like 12 hours and some time, and it will end up something like 7 o'clock in the evening only. So it's just a story only. Gandhi wrote about Bhagavad-Gita as an inner conflict of the human being, personified into two characters and presented as a story in Mahabharata. That is how he says it, in our belief that this was true. But anyway, in this major discourse, Krishna says the Varna is breaking. And what happens is based on your karma. So the idea of karma is narrated there. So the whole idea that we see is that you see a new interpretation of the caste system or the Varna system. And one is advocating against the mixing up of Varnas. The God sees the mixing up of Varnas, and that's against the dharma. Therefore, to re-establish the dharma, he has incarnated. Though the war was not for that. That's a very complicated structure. But in any case, the defeat of the Sramanika religions did happen. And in a few centuries, you see that Buddhism, Jainism, and Ajivaka cult completely loses its control over the country. Except Jainism, nothing really did continue because Jainis were mainly traders and moneylenders. And traders, anyway, in any society, they would transform into the system and they would continue. But Buddhism almost ended in India, and Ajivakas totally got wiped off, and Buddhism prevailed later in other parts of the world, in eastern part of the world. In southern India, there was Buddhism. Till 7th century, there was no Brahminic religion. There was no Vedic religion in southern India. For example, in Kerala, till 7th century, there was no caste system. There was only Jainism and Buddhism that came from Sri Lanka that controlled Kerala. And it was on the 7th century only the Brahminic structures and Sanskrit and all other, or caste system got introduced to this part of India. So coming to the fundamental idea of reincarnation. So this is the tradition. So I sum up one point that before Alexander's invasion, you don't see any mention of reincarnation or rebirth as a major thing in the Vedas. There were so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hymns asking for anything and everything that they wished, from children to success, to win the heart of the gods, to get good rains, everything they asked. So they wanted to get the support of some of the gods to have victory over their enemies. Yes, all well understandable structures. But they never asked for a better life in the next life, because there was no idea of a new life there. That is one thing. They even asked for better alcohol, sura, fermented. It's from some plants, juice from certain plants, fermented, is something that gives a great, fantastic energy for some time, and that is good before a great war. So they wanted to get better sura. And another thing that they got was soma. And what is soma? Soma is a kind of a creeper, and they would say that they would not feel hunger for a long time, and they would get the magical world. They can see the other world. They can see a lot of colors. What that could be? That could be psychedelic experiences coming out from some kind of marijuana, which is very popular in many parts of India from those times. Almost in any other parts of the world, it was around that time people started using certain herbs for psychedelic experience. So apparently, soma could be something like ancient form of marijuana, and sura could be alcohol. But there are rituals to get better sura, better soma, better rain, better victory, better children, everything, but not better birth. They don't speak about that. So there was nothing of that sort earlier. But after Alexander's invasion, we see it. Alexander got it from Aristotle. We know that there is official record that Aristotle believed in reincarnation. And after that, you see, before that, there was no idea of a god incarnating into a human being. Vedas, you don't see it. But post-Alexander, we see such things. You have the same idea in Greece. The gods, Jupiter was there in almost all the emperors. And emperor was a personified form of the god himself. This idea got transformed. And so many mythological stories got this color and it got transformed. This is natural. This is how ideas transformed. And the what you call the faiths transformed. And this is how everywhere in the world, in Babylonia, in Assyria, everywhere you see all this kind of blending of different ideas and blending of different cultures, which would go into different forms. Now, the popular culture about transforming from one life to the next is contradictory to Shiva Purana, as I explained, and that is not against even the Jainist faith, that Jainist belief that it's a continuation with a lot of different births, including insects and lives, and cats and birds, and you have a lot of different lives. That is the general belief. But now there is a popular folk belief, altogether different in almost all parts of the world. That is a contemporary idea or contemporary form of the idea of reincarnation. It's very different from all these traditions. There is a set of people in the West coming from eastern part of the world. They believe that you have immediately a new birth, and they identify people. Some children would say that, I remember that I was this guy, and most probably they would locate a person some 60, 70 kilometers in the nearby. They would say some stories. When people are believing in something, they have a hyper belief system, and they would identify themselves as part of the belief system. And many of you must be knowing about the psychological phenomenon, which is known as the pseudologia fantastica. When children, when in their vulnerable age, if they get some ideas, and if they get it registered in very seriously, hyper registration, if it happens, they will recreate anything that they see around and fix their magical thinking into that. You tell a child about reincarnation stories, and they would find themselves as a reincarnation of somebody. And others will add up stories, and they will finally, like a self-professed prediction, they will find somebody that will fit to the story. And then everybody tells the story, and the story will get colored, and it motivates, and people will believe it. So such kind of beliefs are very, very popular nowadays. And one of the common faiths now is connected with your illness is because you have done something in the past life. You have very close feelings with somebody. You feel attached to somebody. That's the reason is in the previous birth, you have a connection. That's a kind of folk transformation of this idea. But this folk transformation is used efficiently by some people. There are regression therapists nowadays. In many parts of India and many parts of even in Eastern Europe, you can see such people who are regression therapists. They believe that if you have a permanent pain somewhere, there could be a reason. You must have got a hit on that part of your body. Maybe your elbow is paining all the time because you got a hurt on the elbow in 3 generations back, and that was not cured. So you have to go back 3 generations back and do the rituals there and bring you back. That's a kind of belief that's promoted by a lot of people. There are a lot of fake psychiatrists also, who are using these kind of ideas. They called 1960s it started. And Simantani was one of the persons from Sri Lanka who began this idea that you can be hypnotized, taken back to your childhood, and then back to the previous life, and then back to the previous life. And you can get ideas from there, and you can come back from that. So you can find solutions from your previous birth. That's a popular belief that is, at least followed by a small section of people. So this faith bases its idea on hypnosis. And hypnosis is something very different, but presented totally different by these people. What is hypnosis? Hypnosis is you are hyper vulnerable because of the suggestions. You are in a trance, basically. You are somewhere between your consciousness and your sleep. And then your suggestibility level is very, very high. You can be told something and you believe it. But if it's against your wishes, you will wake up immediately. But if it's following your faith system, following what you believe, you would tune up to that. The whole idea of lie detectors, using hallucinogenic drugs. One can easily challenge that. It has been challenged in many parts of the world because in a hallucination structure, it's hallucinogenic. Hypnosis is a situation where you are vulnerable to hallucinations and you can be suggested into any kind of hallucination. You can be told that you are a cat and you would behave like a cat, but it's a temporary phase only. You can be told that you have wings and you can try to fly from the window and fall down, die. But so then your consciousness will counter it, and sometimes you suddenly wake up and understand it also. But the idea is you are in a hyper suggestible situation, and what you are there at that time is nothing to do with reality. So this hypnosis, which is not reality, but a suggested conditioned situation is presented to those who believe that you are actually going back into your previous life, actually going back to your earlier times. Many people believe that. For those who people believe that, it's a good idea to tell them that you are actually going back to your early life. So if you are told a story that you have been the king of this local area, or you have been a great merchant at that time and you had great success, people are interested to hear stories about them. Like astrologers who would make fantastic stories that will fascinate you. These people also, another form of astrologers in the guise of psychiatry, would speak about your previous life and make fantastic stories that will fascinate you. And you would really start believing it. There have been a very popular television series. When I was still in India in 2009 or 2010, it was on Star TV. There was one lady coming up in channels and presenting real stories in quotation, and bringing out people and telling people that, the audience that, this person had some issue. He was a local king and he had a fight in 14th century somewhere. And now that is what is haunting this person, etc. A lot of people believe such things. I had 2 times encounter with this lady on televisions. In Star TV itself, I've been on a direct encounter with this lady. And I've brought in very clear evidences that the whole thing is false and could simply corner her right away on the face of the whole thing with the help of course, a very, very successful modern psychiatrists who are at my side always. Together, we completely cornered her in that program. So these kind of things get a lot of folk following because it fascinates your imagination. So this has nothing to do with reality. Karma is an idea that whatever happens to you is not because anything that happens here, because of something that happened earlier. An absurd hypothesis that Aristotle had made long ways all the way to India, and from there, several religions. India is the birthplace of several great religions, and it has been taken into many faiths, especially the Vaishnava culture, not the Shiva culture. Shiva culture does not take it, not even the Shakta culture, the worship of women in India. There are 3 major groups of faith in India, or 4, I would say. The Vaishnavites, the Vishnu worshippers, then the Shaivites, the Shiva worshippers, and the Shakti worshippers. Of which the Vaishnavites took the story of reincarnation. Shiva stories don't have this reincarnation. They didn't take it much in support of this. But Shiva Purana speaks about reincarnation, but in a different narration, something closer to the Jainist belief. Like people would get into different lives, but not as humans. That is how it is narrated. So if you take the whole spectrum of belief in connection with rebirth, it's all mutually contradictory, different stories from Buddhism to Jainism to Ajivikas to from Greek faith or the Shiva Purana faith or this Vaishnava faith. If you take any of these stories and compare with some other story, you would laugh a lot. There is nothing that connects these together. So how it becomes important in the present day context. That is why I wanted to talk about this subject. In the present day context, when a lot of people in the Indian society who considers themselves lower caste, who considers themselves they are bound to worship the Brahmin authority, believe that they have to follow this order, follow their destiny, follow their karma, because that's a divine order. You cannot change it. That's one of the reasons that people are not articulate and fightful to go and get things done and get victory in your life. You see, there are less and less people, or you don't see much startups in India. People want to work in services. They want to work the destined job. They want to break. They don't want to break up and go into new professions, at least in the rural areas. In the urban areas, things have changed a lot. But this dramatic situation that people feel that everything in their life is the destiny, you cannot change it. It's your karma. And breaking the karma is against the wishes of God. And that is why the idea of karma was used in Bhagavad-Gita for the rise against the Sramanika religions by the then the Neo-Vedic religion, or the Sanatan Dharma that emerged in the 2nd, 3rd century times. And caste system was established thoroughly, and it straightened its positions very, very clearly. And people became more and more bound up in these traditions, and the dirty jobs and the difficult jobs were shifted to people And they were kept off mainly that they should not revolt. They were termed into untouchables. They have to keep a certain distance. Apparently, which also was a plan, a very careful plan, to keep them off coming to you, because if you come closer to you, you get a punishment. You can be killed, you can be beaten, you can be, thrown off from your place, or you can be born as a worm in the next life. Praise the Brahmin, follow the order, you have a better life. That was the order. That kept India with his faith. That kept India without any challenge. That kept India with a submissive mind. And that kept majority of Indians under a certain level of intelligence, because if you are a Shudra, you cannot even study. They considered Vedas the big wisdom. If you read, and if you're a Shudra and if you read, you can be punished. There is a famous story in Ramayana. Ram goes to the forest because a Brahmin boy has died. Why the Brahmin boy died? There is something wrong happening somewhere. And they found that a Shudra is studying there. A Shudra is studying Vedas, and therefore the karma's cycle, the order of the time has been broken. So Brahmin boy simply died. So Ram goes to the forest, finds this guy, Shambhuga, and kills him. Ask him, what are you reading? He says Vedas. And what is your background? I'm a Shudra. You are not allowed to do it. You are doing something wrong. He's done. He's finished. He killed. And that Brahmin boy immediately gets life back. That's the kind of idea that prevailed or was taken as a message to the people. You cannot break the law. And you have to remain uneducated. You have to remain in that job because that's convenient for me. That's how the Brahmins said. That's how the upper caste said. Well, it can be compared only with one thing, slavery. During slavery in Roman Empire or in any other traditional cultures, even in Egypt there was slavery, slaves had no opportunity to break it. If they challenged, they were killed, they were beaten, they were thoroughly whipped. But here, a social order, without a whipping, without killing them, they gave an idea of submission into their brain. And they got a very clear idea telling them that your miseries are because you have done something in the past life. It's your karma. You cannot change it. So you are in the cycle of karmas. You can break the karma cycle and you can become a better being or an upper caste person. You serve the Brahmin, serve the system, follow the cycle of faith system. Then you will be rewarded. So obey, and obey. Then you will be rewarded. That was the idea behind the karma. That was the idea behind the rebirth idea. That was the idea behind the traditional setback of India's rise. A country that could resist, that could even fight Alexander at that time, which has made great successes, with great empires, got majority of its people, or a large section of the people, away from for sharing the success. They kept them off as a support working people without proper reward, with humiliation, with discrimination, telling them that you are untouchable because you have done something wrong in the past life. This was an ideology based on exploitation, stood on exploitation, and continued on exploitation. Therefore, karma and rebirth are the worst ideas India produced. Thank you. Now we can have questions. Tony Matthew, if you can speak.
Hey, Sanal sir, how are you? So I had two questions. I think one of them might be a simple clarification, which is, so you talked about Ramayana and Mahabharata and Indians taking the idea of karma and maybe even rebirth from Alexander, right? But wasn't Ramayana written before Alexander came to India?
There is, earlier forms of Ramayana, yes, you can say, but Ramayana is not speaking about any rebirth.
Yeah, I thought, and maybe it's my mistake, but I thought Rama was considered a rebirth of Vishnu.
Yeah, that is a Ramayana in the ancient form of Ramayana. It's not explained as, it's the story of Ramavasti. That was evolving. The present day Ramayana has several forms. But the oldest form that we know is Valmiki Ramayana. But even before that, there were many narrations of Ramayana. That was not presented as Vishnu's reincarnation. Okay. That's a later part of it. But again, that's incarnation. That comes much later. And Mahabharata is actually older than Ramayana.
Yep.
I mean, Jaya as the older form is much, much older than Ramayana. But Mahabharata, but the Bhagavad-Gita, many stories came, added to it, and it got, swelled up. And apparently on the 2nd century, 3rd century only Bhagavad-Gita came. And therefore, Ramayana could be much later. The present day Ramayana with the Vaishnava ideas came 3rd century, 4th century only. But the earlier forms did not have this incarnation idea.
Okay. So the other question, so thanks for that. The other question is a pretty simple one. So, and I know you mentioned this, which is, there are many people who pose as psychiatrists who are even probably well qualified, who talk about regression theories and helping people. And in some ways they do help people, or maybe at least superficially they seem to have helping people. I don't know if you've heard of Brian Weiss and Many Lives, Many Masters. So Brian Weiss, his background is he's a Columbia and Yale graduate. He has really good credentials with psychiatry. He used to practice psychiatry. And then randomly he came across a lady who supposedly was, was seeing past births and all that stuff. So he compiled a whole book, and I've read through the book. It seems to be written pretty well. Now, I'm no psychiatrist, I'm not scientist, so I don't know if it was, all based on proper scientific practices, but it seems very convincing, about that lady's experiences and how Brian was trying to make sure that it remains objective and scientific. Any thoughts on that? I don't know if you know the specific one or even others.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you complete?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. So Brian is, that's a well-written book.
Yep.
You can read it. So, I've read it also.
Mm-hmm.
But what I feel is that whether it is written with the facts documented and verifiable is quite doubtful. You have, and I can suggest you another major source for all these kind of stories, Ian Stevenson. Ian Stevenson was, mainly he was a linguist. That was his academic qualification. He's also having a doctorate in linguistics and all these kind of things. But he later started an institution to promote the idea of rebirth, the Society of Reincarnation or the Institute of Reincarnation he started. But his major researches are published in several books. And one thing that I noticed, which I have met Ian Stevenson in New Delhi, in the Max Muller House in Delhi, there was a speech of him. And I was there as part of the audience because I was studying these kind of cases at that time. And meantime, I knew that the first 20 stories that he published as very authentic stories. One story was of this Shakuntala Devi, which Gandhi's story, you know that story, I think. Yes. Shanti Devi, not Shakuntala, Shanti Devi. During Gandhi's time, there was a very popular story in Chandni Chowk in Delhi, wherein one lady claimed about her reincarnation, and the immediate reincarnation kind of story. And Gandhi sends Pyarelal, his secretary, and Pyarelal studies the whole thing and reports back to Gandhi, and Gandhi writes in Navajivan, explaining that this is absolutely a false story. And I believe in karma, I believe in all these kind of things, but this is a false story. That's the story. But this story is one of those stories you can read in Ian Stevenson's major book as an authentic evidence of reincarnation. Then there was in Rajasthan University in 1960, there was a department of to study about rebirth. One Professor Banaji was the head of the department, and University Grants Commission has granted money for that. And this Banaji was a very efficient person. He was a good media publicity blitz person, and he had a lot of interviews everywhere and all. And in a span of 1 year, he produced something like 2,000 case studies. And the research was mainly collecting stories. And case studies, for example, like Freud would do. But Freud, when for his own personal experiences of psychiatric cases, here, which he called his subjects, here, he took stories of other people. He collected stories from everywhere and he narrated all the stories. And the university later found it very difficult to digest the methods that he was following. Then the University Grants Commission decided to make an inquiry commission. And they established an inquiry commission with Satish Shah from Delhi University and some other people from UGC and all these kind of people. They studied the method that he had. They found that there was no research, but collecting stories from the villages. And they recreated. And there was no verification done. He was just trying to propagate his faith using this facility. So therefore, they stopped the grant and closed down the university. But he has gone to America, settled down there. And Ian Stevenson was in close association with Dr. Banaji. So the first 20 reports that Banaji produced, which the University Grants Commission refused, can be read in the book of Ian Stevenson. So therefore, I had a very serious doubt about the integrity of his methodology of research, not the person, his methodology of research. I happened to meet him in Delhi, and I had a brief chat on the coffee session, and I asked him, is there any other case you can, he said he has a lot of cases. Any case? He said there are cases everywhere coming. All over India, there are reincarnation cases. And he spoke about a case of Kulolala in Hathras near Agra, where a Kulolala was a merchant who was shot dead by some dacoits, and a boy who never knew this guy was reborn. And the boy, Pradeep, tells all the story. Narration was perfectly correct and media was in hype. And he told the story and showed me some report. So he left. And I was an investigative journalist, and with that spirit of my inquiry also, I went behind the story. I went to Hathras, located Kulolala's family, and pretended that I'm a journalist. Of course, I was a journalist also, and got that most of the stories told in the newspapers were not correct. In fact, Kulolala died, that was correct. A boy claimed, that was correct. The story says that the boy came there and his wife, Kulolala's widow, Sudha, said that, well, we both knew a place where we would keep the key. Can you locate it? The boy went and took the key. That's the story. That is what I read in Times of India. Well, I asked Sudha this case. She said that part is correct, that the boy tried to locate it everywhere, but he could not locate it. He could not locate it. That's why I had a doubt about the whole thing. But somehow I felt so close to the whole thing because he was speaking as my husband and called me Sudha and all. I was very moved. But later, everything, then he wanted his family insisted that half of the property should be transferred to his name, etc., etc. Then they felt foul, they smelled foul, and they stopped the whole thing. So then I went to this Pradeep's home. But they had a feeling, if it was correct, if it was Kulolala, that's the point that they tried to help him, but did not allow him to grow in this house or take control of this house. But the boy was financially supported and all. I went to this village. He was a small boy, 8, 9 years old. I still remember that was in 1990s. Maruti car was first produced in India. I got one of the first cars I got, and it started producing in India after 1985 only, or something like that. Kulolala died at least 7 years before that. When I went to this remote village, the boy came to me, and I carried the boy and talked a lot, and I said, I'm coming from Kulolala's family. And he actually thought I'm from his family or something. Then he was fancied by the car, small little car. What is Maruti car? But at that time, it was something very important. And the boy said, oh, I remember this was when I was in Kulolala, I was driving this car. You came in Kulolala's car. But I just noticed that Maruti did not produce car at that time. So, and he said, oh, this brand, I know, Maruti. That was my car. So I noted everything and I came out with the whole thing. And I later talked to. So this was a story he believed was correct. But he didn't go to Hathras. I did go to Hathras. So this is one way of seeing things. But the psychiatrists that they use, I know one lady who was in many television programs that I was in also. She said she was a professional psychologist and a clinical psychiatrist. She said, well, it's so stupid. My hospital is asking that we should have a regression therapy center also. He said, there is nothing of that sort. You are taken to believe what you want only. So, but the hospital owner said that, but a lot of rich customers want that. So we should have a center. And whatever way you go through, whether it is real or not, let's have that center because people are willing to pay a lot of money to go back to their old life. So they had this center and she was the head of it. I know this story. This was shocking and sad. Thank you. Anyway, good thought.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sadish.
Actually, my question is very simple. You have gone through many books and research and all kind of stuff. Do you believe in karma and rebirth? Very simple question.
Do I believe in karma? No, I don't believe in karma because I don't think that's a logical explanation which is satisfying my intelligence. I don't believe in karma because I would believe that I could change my destiny to a great extent, or at least grab what I have in my life to the best possible. I know that people can do a lot of things. They can transform their lives. Everything is possible, and nothing is decided by any past life. At least I have no evidence about any past life. The possibility of that does not fit into the knowledge realm that I am aware of. So I would not accept that idea.
Okay, so you are not believing in karma.
No.
But it's very popular in Indian culture that if you do good will come back to you. If you do bad things will come. But but it's very strange actually for me also. I have seen many people doing the good and those people getting suffering actually. So, but it's a deep belief in India about this karma actually. So I was just getting a clarity from your side, Sanal. Yeah, that's my question actually. And what about rebirth? Do you believe in rebirth?
No, absolutely no. I don't believe in rebirth. But I have an academic interest in this subject and I study about it. I study about the claims because I don't believe that one has to simply reject everything a priori, but understand their arguments, understand their sources, and then reject it is a better way of doing it. That's how I try to do it.
Okay. Thank you, Sanal.
Yeah, I don't believe in rebirth. I don't believe in karma. I mean, what saddens me is that, many people have done quite good things in their life, and sometimes they have very bad life. And some people have done a lot of wicked things, still they have a very good life. That doesn't explain.
Yeah. That's the reason actually that makes me also a bit confused actually. Same way. It's, I can explain. If I explain, I have seen that many people doing bad things, eventually they are getting some bad vibes or bad destiny or that kind of stuff. But actually, I believe in karma. Maybe I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but somehow it's in my heart that I believe in karma. And I had a friendly conversation with one of my mentor, and he told me that if there is karma, actually during our conversation there was a big accident in Kerala near one temple, Kollam. Many people died on that accident. There was incident, something like that. And he told that if you believe in karma, can you just justify during that incident? Many kids were died actually, very brutal way. Like they just like they were, in fire actually. And those pictures was in the media. So if there is karma, what mistake these babies have done? Actually, that made me the first confusion. So, but it's an interesting topic about this one. So on that day onwards, I was a bit confused, but we can see the evidence both actually. Sometimes no karma and karma. But from your perspective, there is no karma.
No, I would put it. I would put it in a different word. For example, the word karma has several meanings: duty, responsibility, and action. Okay, if you believe karma as something coming from the past life, I don't believe in it. But if you believe in action here and now and doing something here and now, if somebody is in trouble, and what is the best karma? If you can help, try to help the person. That's karma. And that is done not because of any reward in the next life, not because of any reward here in this life, but a sense of satisfaction that I get is the reward that I would get. That is the biggest karma. And more than that, beyond that, what you can do, you should do here and now. And that's something we know. And when you do something here and now in this world, that will have a result tangible in front of your eyes. Sometimes you may not have a result also, but you have tried. That's important.
Yeah, and from the history of, if you go to some religious books or kind of stuff, we can see another kind of stuff. If there was karma, why Sri Ram and Sita suffered a lot actually. They both were good actually.
Yeah, good argument.
And, what was the reason they suffered? Even Jesus suffered actually. So if you believe in karma, it's if you believe in karma, you have to believe in rebirth also, I think. Otherwise, there is no point in that one actually.
Absolutely. Yeah. The story
story
of Jesus has a different idea of sacrifice. Biblical belief of, sacrifice. The Old Testament is speaking about a lot of sacrifices that Jehovah wants, and that only makes him happy. So Jesus' crucifixion was presented by the theologians as a great sacrifice. The idea of sacrifice is all your sins are taken into the sacrificial animal, and the sacrificial animal is butchered, and the sins are, over there. So that was the idea. It coming from the idea of animal sacrifice or human sacrifice. Thank you. Anyway, good thought. So
thanks, Sanal. You can go to the next person. Actually, Sanal, I am from Sweden. Actually, I know you are in Finland. Actually.
Yes, I'm in Finland. Yes, nice meeting you. We'll be in touch later.
Yeah. Okay, Sanal.
Yeah. And any questions coming from Clubhouse?
Yes.
Yes, Mrs. Kunyama from USA. Yeah.
Yes. I had a lot of questions about this.
But make one or two maximum.
I mean, a lot of questions about rebirth and reincarnation. Now you clear there is not such things. I've always thought it was in Vedas, but you told me there is no word in Vedas like that. And Veda is also written by Swamis after drinking Somarasa. That I remember you once told. And then he told us this Mahabharata is a history of clan wars. So the Bible is like examples and trying to bring people certain beliefs. I don't have nothing against any religion or any caste, anything like that. But and you said Christ resurrected, but that's what it is taught. But did the body resurrected or the idea resurrected? Lazarus resurrected, it says resurrected, but what is resurrected from Lazarus? He just lived a life. But when Christ resurrected, Christianity, that idea lived on. This is what I'm thinking this day.
Yeah, thank you.
Am I correct?
Thank you. I didn't say that Jesus resurrected. I said as per the story, because I didn't think, I don't believe that Jesus resurrected. I don't think at all. I mean, that's a true story. That's part of a mythological story. So the resurrected gods are part of the ancient belief system. In Babylonia, in Assyria, in Egypt, everywhere you see resurrected gods. That was an ancient idea. And similarly, when a mythology was emerging, they wanted a resurrected god. So whether Jesus was a historic person or not, I have very serious doubts about even the historicity of Jesus Christ, because there is no outside Bible evidence about Jesus Christ, which I have already talked in one of the meetings. I don't want to go into that. But I mean, that's a beautiful way of presentation. In the story, Jesus got resurrected, but well, there is no evidence about any Jesus lived or any resurrection happening, but Christianity prevailed. But how did Christianity prevail? It prevailed because it had political power. It prevailed, it has defeated all opponents. It has killed all opponents or tortured all opponents. All through the centuries, all opponents of the church were punished and tortured and humiliated or burnt alive, and it survived. But that's not the case of church alone. You go to Babylonian religions, they have done the same thing. The Roman religions, they have done the same thing. The Shiva religion or the Shakta religion or the Vaishnavites, they all did the same thing. Islam did it abundantly. Every single religion has done annihilation of their opponents. So their survival is not something to be great, we need not be very proud about, because it's not on the merits of their work, but the merit of their cruelty and the principle of annihilation of the opponent, that they all survived. Anyway, thank you very much for that thought.
One more thing.
Yeah.
So
also, I did not say, I would make a correction. I did not say that the drunken Swamis have written Vedas. Is a highly oversimplified way of saying it, because I didn't say that there was no Swami idea or the Rishis. These ideas all come much later. During Vedas, they were all common people. They were doing sacrifices at that time. The yaga, they called it. They made yagas to satisfy their gods. The gods were Indra, Varuna, and a lot of people, in the other world. Ashwanis, there were a lot of people. There were no Vishnu. There is no Shiva. Of course, there is a mentioning about Rudra, but not that important a character. That there are other gods. Indra was the king of the other world, and they were fighting, and they thought they have locally Dasyus, the local enemies, and against the fight against Dasyus, they wanted the help of the Devas. That is how but they are also doing yagas or sacrifices to get better Sura or better Soma, which means, also they speak about Indra getting Soma and getting intoxicated and doing a lot of wild action. And they would want to become like Indra, to become fiery and attack their enemies. And therefore, Indra, give me, Soma. That's how it is presented. It's beautiful literature, but not that they are drunken Swamis writing the whole thing. That's not how I said it. Thank you.
The human life exists in planet Earth as a recyclic way phenomenon, recycling phenomenon, like death and birth. And these genes continue so many generations. What I see in person, I see people from Kashmir. They are white people. They have golden hair. I have seen the same thing in Malabar area with golden hair and white skin, and they speak Malayalam. So, the foreigners came to our country. So that genes still exist in our genes of India. So this life is like a recycled phenomenon, like birth, death. What do you think about that?
So the words are so many confusing words. Recycle means you use something and you don't throw away, but reuse it. That is recycling. That's the meaning of recycling. Continuation of tribes or human life is a different thing. There is no recycling there. In a way, one can say people are living eternally because our genes are carrying a lot of experiences, a lot of memories, a lot of past, and taking it forward to the next generation. We are not knowing it, but a part of us is going to us, our children, and they are continuing and they are passing it over to the next generation. So in a way, we are continuing, but not in the classical way of reincarnation. So it's not a recycling. There is no recycling. Where is, for example, if our fuels are over, can we recycle our fuels, the fossilated fuels? No, we cannot. There are certain things we can recycle, but not all things. So recyclable things, reusable things, or sustainable things are to be used because there are many things that are not recyclable. Carbon is not recyclable. What we get as petroleum is not recyclable. So therefore, there are recyclable things. There are not recyclable things. There are fossilated things which will come up to an end someday. So we try to recycle our natural resources, the iron, the metals we recycle. Every product we try to reuse it so that we conserve things. We don't end up things till we find new resources for things. That is how it's to be seen. Thank you. Thank you very much for the thought.
Sorry for the wrong word you said.
No. I was explaining. It's not to be sorry about. I was trying to put your words in a little presentable way. It's all fine. Wonderful.
But one more thing. You said these Buddha Swamis, sannyasis, they wear a mask all the time. And these hardcore Swamis, I have come across to them while I was a teenager. Come across means I lived in Delhi. So when I crossed the way road, there is used to one or two Swamis pass by and in their attire, and they always wear masks. Accidentally they come so quiet, such a peace. You cannot see. I don't even see them. They are coming. I run into them accidentally, but they don't have any change, or they don't even notice me. I'm a human. Touch them. They move on walking the way. So my sister and other friends, others also did the same. They all warned. We had to be very careful. We may not run into those Swamis.
Yeah, let's make it precise so that others can also speak. I'll come to that. Yeah. Yes, you have met some people, with wearing masks, but they are not. You think that they were Swamis because generally a person coming from southern part of India, they think that everybody who is in a different attire could be all Hindu Swamis. No, the people with a mask that you see, they were not Hindu Swamis. They were Jain monks because only Jain monks would wear this mask because they only believe that's also one set of Jain monks. They believe that insects are, people reincarnated. So you should not kill anybody. They would not even eat rooted food because in the process, you would be, by mistake, killing some kind of a living form. So anything under the earth, they would not eat. So that's Jain monks, just for clarification. But they are generally very peaceful people. Some of them even would not wear any cloth, part of their faith. And that's all. India is a mixture of a lot of different faith. I don't believe in any of these religions, but it's a fascinating world of faith. One can see all these things and try to understand them, their perspective. And still, one can reject everything and live as an atheist, like me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Sanal sir, as usual, unbroken and long-lasting session you had. I had, a couple of questions, Mr. Sanal. That is, the spiritual schools in India, many of them, they depend on, this belief of karma siddhanta and the rebirths. Because as you're aware, you're a very knowledgeable person. Many spiritual schools believe that end of karmas and end of rebirths itself is the liberation, which they call as moksha. Many spiritual schools believe in that. You're aware of that. And along with that, what I want to, bring out to your notice is that there is a belief that so many different saints who have achieved, what they say, I'm telling different states of consciousness, is because of their past life sadhanas. So in this life, they've achieved to that state. That belief is there in our Indian society. That was the one thing. And along with that, clubbed with that, there is this thing, in Buddhist tradition, they find out that the Lama, how they search the Lama is based on, they'll search for a kid who they believe that he has taken so many lives. And he was a Lama before, and such kind of knowledge and intellect that kid is having. So like that, they go and search in Tibet and so many other places. Hope you're aware of this. Searching Lama, Buddhist Lama. So your opinion on this, please.
First of all, the claim that some people make that they have a lot of achievement, the word sadhana means devoted work for something, devotion to a certain work. That is sadhana. So sadhana done in the past life is the reason for their success. If somebody claims that, that person can be presented as a person who would justify his glory, which has no real sadhana in this life. So what he has in this life cannot be claimed as a result of his sadhana or karma in this life, because he knows that he doesn't deserve it. He can only find a deserving mood for that, thinking that it must be coming from the past. I don't deserve it. I didn't do anything. But still I have a glory and success and money. So I must have done something good in my past life. So that means he's an incapable person to attain this glory or wealth that he has. And he wants a sanction from the past life action for that. He doesn't think that he deserves that in this life with what he has done. Show how small that person is. Because he doesn't even think that he deserves what he has now. He can only find a justification. How did me, the stupid person, got all these things? I must have done something good in the past life. That's precisely what he says, isn't it? So that's a kind of a very, refusing self-respect of a person. He doesn't respect himself. He doesn't think that he deserves anything that he has. It must be something some other people have done, or in some other life I have done something, some sadhana at that time, not karma of this life. So means he has something he thinks he does not deserve, number one. And that is the first thing. Anybody can claim. If you have any kind of wealth or glory that you think you don't deserve it, I didn't do anything, but I have a lot of things. I've done something in the past life, therefore I have it. You can say it. Means you think that others who work hard and still don't have anything, they are there because they have done something wrong in the past life. So you accept the social division. You accept the social inequality and you justify it with past life action. That is precisely what's the wrong message of the karma theory or the rebirth theory. Because that will justify injustice. That will justify everybody has a right to live properly. Everybody has a right to be, treated well in their life. And everybody has a right to be successful in their life. They all try, and they should have something rewarded in this life, here and now. That's the important policy that we should have. Any kind of idea that your wealth and your success is something that you have done in the past life is a justification, immoral justification of an immoral amazing of wealth or glory. That's how I would see it. Number two, about lamas. I've been following closely the searching of lamas. So what they do is, not the first filtering is on the exact time. When a lama dies, exactly at that time, who all were born, that is what they first identify. And there are so many cases of manipulation because many people want their children to be lamas. They manipulate the death time and the birth time to fit into the stories, and they will filter in, and throats were removed and all this kind of thing. That's how they go for it, not for the intelligence or anything. And normally at the age of 4, they will decide who will be the lama and what kind of intelligence you will identify at the age of 4. Then you are trained. The training makes the person brilliant, not the skill that you identify before the age of 4. That is how it is done. Anyway, thank you very much for that thought.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And just I wanted to add, in Bhagavad-Gita, there is, it's written that a person who has done good deeds will be born in rich and the priest class, something like
that. Where is it in Bhagavad-Gita? I have read Bhagavad-Gita, that he will be born in rich and... Which,
not exactly.
There are only 700 stanzas in Bhagavad-Gita. If you can recite that stanza, I can just check it.
Yeah, no, what I meant is he will get a good birth. That's what it says. If he has done good deeds, he will get good births. Something like that, some phrases there, correct?
But you are not very clear about that. It's not exactly how what you said it is written there. It is written that you have to do your karma. Karma will be rewarded, is what is said. And you have to do your karma. And your destined karma is what you have to do. That you will get a lot of money because of your past life, etc. is not, that's an interpretation of Bhagavad Gita. The wrong interpretation of Bhagavad Gita is like that. It's not written like that in Bhagavad Gita. That's a wrong interpretation of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita can be interpreted in so many different ways because it has so many mutually contradicting stories in that. So many, it's an abridging of several ideas from Upanishads. So some stories speak about a heaven. Some stories speak about rebirth. Some stories speak about nishkama karma. Some stories speak about rewards to be given. What kind of reward? You go and win the war. Then you get reward of getting the nation. And if you die, well, you will get the heaven. It's an offer of reward. Another part, it speaks about nishkama karma. So in any kind of action without any expectation about the result. On another part, it offers result. So it's a mixture of a lot of contradictory ideas. You can find many things, but unfortunately, what you said is not there in Bhagavad Gita.
Sir, chapter 6, 41 and 42.
Can you just recite it and tell me the meaning of it?
Yes, sir. Please, one second.
Yeah.
It is chapter 6, verse 41. Yeah, it is, okay, I'll use the English translation of this. The unsuccessful yogis, upon death, go to the abode of the virtuous. After dwelling there for many ages, they are again reborn in the earth plane into a family of pious and prosperous people. Else, if they had developed a dispassion due to long practice of yoga, they are born into a family endowed with divine wisdom. Such a birth is very difficult to attain in this world. So they are telling, taking birth in a family where this, so-called spiritual.
What is the stanza? What chapter 6? Stanza number?
Chapter 6, 41 and 42, sir.
41. Let me see what is written. You say about, because I would like to, these are.
It is written that the unsuccessful yogis upon death go to the abode of the virtuous. After dwelling there for so many ages, they are again reborn in the earth plane. That means they take the birth here again. And to a family of pious and prosperous people. Else, if they had developed dispassion.
So does that mean that, what you said originally, I was just taking the whole thing. You are reading the translation that's available in bhagavad-gita.org, right? Yeah. So the commentary is, the commentary given here is what you're reading. So,
sir, no, sir. Sir, actually, this one I've read in so many other books also.
No. Imagine why I mentioned about Bhagavad-Gita is a book of contradictory ideas. So many different ideas are there, and there are ideas that are speaking about nishkama karma. Do your karma without any expectation of result. There are stanzas promising things. Go and win the war. That's promised there. So it also speaks about a mighty, angry God who has decided that he is destined to kill everybody. And that is, I am the killer, I am the destroyer, I am the enemy of all these people. I've seen the death and I brought you death. It's also written in Bhagavad Gita. It's not a pacifist God. So there are so many ideas. That's a warmongering book. It's a war clarion written with a special purpose and added into Mahabharata. So even this part is not what you have originally said. You said, it says that your wealth in this life is because you have done something in the past, is what you said, is written in Bhagavad-Gita. What is written here is a totally different thing. Unsuccessful yogis upon death go to the abode of the virtuous. That is the point. What you said is that you have wealth here because you have done something in the past. In fact, you get higher varna, you get in the higher orders of varna, is explained there. Because varna is what he is deciding. And that is the criterion to decide what is better and what is wrong. And Krishna has incarnated as per Bhagavad-Gita to preserve the order of the varna dharma. That is why he has been born there, not to win this war. And what is varna dharma? Why varna dharma is, that is clearly said. Then Arjuna says, and why it is in problem now? He says, the varnas are mixing up. That's the whole thing. And that's why he wants to bring back the dharma where varnas don't mix up. That's the story. So it is not speaking that you become rich because you've done something. Here it says that upon death, the unsuccessful yogis will go to an abode of virtuous. That doesn't mean that your wealth is because you have done something in the past. No, that's not what it is written here. That's a different thing that you said in the beginning. Anyway, Bhagavad-Gita. Let us make not a shouting match or one-to-one argument. This is a question where a lot of people have to partake in the discussion also. I understand your point. Unfortunately, what you said is not exactly what is said in Bhagavad-Gita. The idea of discrimination, you said that earlier, well, it says that the success is because you have done something. If somebody has success, that's not because of the work here, because you have done something. Because anybody wants to have undue wealth, unvirtuous wealth, immoral success, they can find a justification for their immoral success, immoral virtue, immoral wealth, illicit power. They can say that, well, I've done something in the past world, therefore I get it. All these poor people, they work hard, they don't get anything because they have done something in the past world. That's the philosophy of exploitation. That's the philosophy of oppression. That's what Bhagavad-Gita has contributed. That's precisely what I said. That's my view. And that's not only written by me, but a lot of people have written in this angle of Bhagavad-Gita. But some other people have not taken like this, as you said. For example, Gandhi understood Bhagavad-Gita as a conflict of the person within. There is nothing of this. This is all fallacy. It's just a mythology. It's just a story. No Krishna ever existed. I don't think there was a Krishna and Arjuna arguing. Also, how would they talk for 700 stanzas, which will take nearly 12 hours to recite in front of a war from morning to evening, while warmongering people are there? Well, that's a story. And some people will take it verbatim and think that it's the word of the God. And people like you try to find some kind of a justification for the existing exploitative structure. The present structure socially is very exploitative. You find that this exploitative structure has a justification. That's a God-given justification. That justification is all the unvirtuous, bad people who are in power. And the bad people and immoral people who got amassed a lot of wealth immorally have all justification for their illicit wealth because they have done something in the past. Therefore, their immoral, illicit wealth is justified. Many people believe that. And that is what Bhagavad-Gita has offered to people. I did not say I supported it. I did not support it. I just stated it now. I did not support that statement. Yeah. Please understand. Okay. Then there is no dispute. In fact, if what you said, that many people have taken Bhagavad-Gita in that spirit. Because the kind of social discriminations, the kind of caste division, the kind of caste hierarchy, everything was justified with Bhagavad-Gita. That was the negative contribution that Bhagavad-Gita has done to the society from 2nd century. But when it is taken as an internal conflict, like Gandhi would say, that's seen in a different angle. But this justification was taken for the caste system. Why there is caste system? Why there is some people in misery all the time? Because they have done something bad in the past. So that's, I'm very happy to hear that you don't accept that idea, but that is how it is.
Sir, absolutely, sir. Sir, yeah. Absolutely. I am surprised why you are taking in the negative way, really.
No, I understood. Now I understand. I actually thought you were justifying the Bhagavad-Gita on that point. But now we share the same point. Yeah, we are sharing the same positions. Yeah, I fully, yeah, we share the same point of view. I mean, I fully agree. Thank you, Mahi. Yeah.
Sir, and also to add one more point, sir, like in Bhagavad-Gita or in some book, it says that if a person dies in a war, he will go to, some
hero's heaven. Yeah.
He will get a heaven.
Yeah, he would go to hero's heaven. Yeah, but on the other side, it speaks about reincarnation. It's contradictory again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you, Mahi. I mean, sorry that I misunderstood your point.
Yes, sir. It's okay, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions from Clubhouse?
Yeah, sir, I just have one more question, Sanal sir.
Yeah.
Abhishek,
Yeah.
Sir, it's more of a fact check thing. I mean, because I've been trying to find some truth behind this, but I couldn't find anything. So when you spoke about the Greek influence in Afghanistan to Kashmir, that region. So I have heard this claim that when Alexander came conquer India, I mean, in the Hindustan or probably the Indian subcontinent at that point of time, when he came and then he fought with the King Porus, and then after he decided to not proceed to India because of the mighty emperors Chandragupta Maurya and all of them, he went back and most of his soldiers were really demotivated because it's again a journey back to Macedonia. So they stayed back in that belt, that the modern day Punjab or probably that Afghanistan belt, the Pashtun area, probably that could be the region, the Hindu Kush mountains, and so there, so those soldiers had settled there and married with the local women, and they had their what's the right word? I mean, they had their children, and that generation came, they were established, and that's how the Sindhis and the Pashtuns and all the white skin people actually, they were born in that era. So there's a claim being made in certain, I've heard it in certain platforms. I've tried researching about it, but I couldn't find any data. So I was just wondering if you had any insights on that.
Well, I mean, there are documents available from the Greek sources about their version of the story. So that's something, we didn't have any kind of documentation of history at that time. The marvelous stories about Porus and this little guy who is sitting there who want to have sunlight and all, these are stories presented here. But the Alexander side, the Macedonian side, things were recorded properly. And what their story is as follows. They have been dropping a set of soldiers in different parts. That was one of the offers that Alexander made. In all ancient wars, people are offered many things, during the process. One is abundant sexuality and the looted money, share of the looted money. All ancient wars, and that was one of the major, in modern day wars also, it's continued. I mean, though it is illegal, any place the soldiers go, they get cheap booze, they loot places and take things. This all are happening. In Iraq, American soldiers have been taking away artifacts. I mean, we have seen all these kind of things. In Muhammad's, invasions, he has offered a major part to the people who would be winning things. And even the slaves, women slaves, he would give them a set of the slaves, and set would go to the common forum. So this was one pattern that existed at that time. But unlike all these people, Alexander offered people who go to the new land, he brought in a lot of people who would settle down there to spread the Hellenic ideas. That was the plan. And he stayed a long time in the present-day Iran, which is Persia. And he tried to marry the king's daughter, emperor's daughter, had a relation with the person anyway. And then he left a lot of people there. Then he moved further. And then here he again settled a lot of people. Everywhere, all through the way, he settled people and then moved forward. But now there was one major problem. From their source, the Greek source, why they returned back was not because of Chandragupta Maurya or anything. And they didn't have, of course, they had a very mighty army with them and forces with them at that time. And then a set of the army men were wanting to go back. It was pretty long time now. They wanted to go back. They got a lot of wealth. And some people who wanted to settle down, they got. All their salaries were accumulated back there. They got salaries at that time. They were professional army. So they wanted to go back to their families. And many people said that, come, we cannot go further. Let's go back and come back for the next rite again. And there was an internal requirement for that. Still, Alexander divided the areas that he controlled. And then they were given, governors were established. And they were, and the education institutions were established. And they were encouraged to promote the culture of the Hellenic tradition. And then he lended them, provided them money, and then he moved back. Persia he has done, and then came forward. And then on way he dies. Then after Alexander, the mighty empire, which is documented, was divided by this. There were 4 major governors for the controlled area. They divided the controlled area into 4, and it became 4 different units. So that is all written in the well documented from the Greek tradition. There were so many thousands of people who were dropped here to continue with their education structures and spreading of the Hellenic culture, and then only they left back. And they have done it in Persia, in many other parts. Wherever they have gone, they left a lot of people. That's documented. We don't have any document from the Indian side for that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
And sir, this the fact that these you spoke about the Savarna part.
Yeah.
So is it safe to assume that the people who were living when this invasion happened, right? They were actually had the same color as we traditionally Indians had. We were all dark, right? Dark-skinned people. That's where. But when this invasion happened, and due to those people settling in, and they mixed with the local people, and their descendants, came out to be white. Is there any truth in that? Because all the people, we see today from that belt, Pashtuns or Sindhis and all the Sardars and Punjabis, essentially, they're all white skinned. Is it because of that factor? Do you think that would be the
I would assume that has an influence, but I don't have any tangible evidence based on DNA studies. I haven't gone through that. That's an interesting point. I would like to go through some studies if somebody has done. But without that evidence in my hand, I would not make a wrong statement, because if I do not know, I would honestly say that I do not know. There is enough possibilities to that to be true. But that would be substantiated only when we have a tangible evidence based on DNA studies. I don't have access to such information at this moment, but next time when I talk to you or in another meeting, meantime, that's my nature. I would go and study now.
Sure, sir. So even I tried my level best to read about it, but I couldn't. I actually heard this claim, sir, if you won't believe, in a movie. It's in a Bollywood movie actually that came in. It's called The Vicky Donner. I'm not sure if you've heard about this movie. Ayushmann Khurrana's debut movie. So in that movie, this reference was mentioned, and since then, I tried many sources, but couldn't find any relevant documents. So I thought, because you have very deep understanding. So great, sir. Even I'll research. Probably, if I find it myself, I'll get back to you, or probably you can get back to me as well. But thank you, sir.
One more, maybe one point to add on that. The gods were the same people as the emperors, as the Greek tradition says it. The word Skanda was one of the words used for emperor. And Skanda was a god as well as an emperor. We have a Skanda Purana in India after that. And who is Skanda? Now, Skanda was a god with a trident. And that's Muruga or Subramaniam, who is the son of Shiva. That's how India absorbed all these structures. There's a Skanda Purana. And this trident was used mainly by the people who were living in the present-day Iran. That was before reaching India, Alexander's previous point of stopping was Persia. There, the Ahrimanyu had this trident and this erected penis, the phallus symbol, which Shaivites in India later follow. So, but the Shaiva tradition has also a southern origin, which is also very, very clearly established now. So, in many parts of the world, there are phallus worship and all that's going on, but the trident connected with the Subramanyam or Murugan, who is also known as Skanda, is a blending of local faith as well as Alexander. Therefore, in Greece, there are studies that says that in the Indian god Skanda is our Alexander. I've read a book about that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek. That's we move on to Prav. Can ask?
Yeah.
I just want to ask a personal question. So you were staying in Delhi, I think, up till 1990s. And Delhi is very close to Haridwar, very close to Rishikesh. You have traveled only 300 kilometers to Rishikesh. So have you ever encountered or had an interaction with a yogi? Have you ever done any sadhana or upasana as they prescribe? Have you done any yogic practice? So do you have any personal experience in this regard? And I just want to know about that. Thank you.
Well, not from Haridwar. You know, Haridwar, I have a first-hand experience. I came to Delhi way back in late 1970s as a PhD scholar in Jawaharlal Nehru University. After completing my master's in Kerala University, I came to Delhi. Then I settled down in Delhi. Until 2010, I was living in Delhi. So I had long innings in Delhi. And, you know, when I came to have my university interview in Jawaharlal Nehru University, after giving the interview and before getting the result, I had 5 days. You know what I did first? I went to Haridwar and Rishikesh. That's where I went at that time. One very good thing was, I mean, a friend of my father, one ERC Panikkar was there, who had a travel agency, and there were buses going by the Panikkar's travel. And of course, he said, where do you want to go? Taj Mahal or some other place? I said, I would like to go to Haridwar. And he offered this travel, and I've gone to Haridwar, stayed there, and spent the whole night there, early morning. And I still remember, I mean, the early morning, I mean, the first time I experienced 5 o'clock, I mean, dawn and all this kind of, further north. I mean, now I know at 3 o'clock how dawn would be there in Finland. But yes, I went to Haridwar and Rishikesh and all these places. In my early years, I mean, back before my research began in Delhi, and many times I've gone to, and why I went to Haridwar. That's another fascinating reason, not because of any faith. I've been fascinated with a novelist, namely M. Mukundan in Malayalam. He has written a novel, namely, The Bells Ring in Haridwar. Haridwaril Manigal Mudangunnu in Malayalam. And I was fascinated with this novel, and I mean, I felt I have to experience Haridwar. It was that novel that drove me to Haridwar, not any sadhana or anything. That is why, I mean, later when I became, I mean, a close person to M. Mukundan, I told him also. He said, well, I mean, that was not the message I wanted to give by the book. But I said, that has taken me to Haridwar to see and experience what is Haridwar. That is one experience regarding Haridwar. Well, I didn't have a sadhana under any kind of a holy man or anything, but I have encounters with a lot of holy men. Some of them I try to understand very closely. I mean, there are some different kind of people. You know that there are some people who are interested in dialogue and discussion. And whenever I have a possibility of dialogue and discussion with anybody who is in the path of the spiritual life, I have no problem. I would try to understand their position, talk to them. And I know a lot of people who are very, very much in the spiritual world. Perhaps you know about one person, namely Guru Freddy, who was from the Narayana Gurukula in Kerala. Narayana Guru has 2 sets of followers. One, the atheistic tradition by Sahodaran Ayyappan. The other tradition was Nararaja Guru, Dr. Palpu's son. And Nararaja Guru established the Erimala Center, and the person who was in charge of that center, Freddy, was coming to Delhi at that time because the Naval Center would take away their place, and I mean, they wanted some articles about that. And we had a very close relationship, and we had long sessions of conversation about the sadhana that he was following. And I tried to understand from his perspective. Of course, I would have an open mind to understand their perspective. Then if you ask if I've practiced ever yoga, yes, because I studied Kathakali in my younger times. From my 7 years, I was studying Kathakali very closely. I've performed on at least 300 stages before I stopped performing Kathakali. And I mean, of course, I was always fascinated with Kathakali. And later, I was seeing a lot of Kathakali. And later, I became a board member of the International Center for Kathakali in Delhi. I was the president of the International Center of Kathakali for, it's some years. So I've directed Kathakali plays and I have a close connection with Kathakali. So during my Kathakali training, one of my Kathakali teachers was interested in yoga. So he wanted to, wanted me to have performing of yoga, not the religious side of it, but the flexibility of the body that can be achieved. Yoga, as I understood even at that time, is a physical exercise for me, but which is mainly a body flexibility exercise, not a kind of exercise that will trim you down or help you to pump your heart. That is what is generally important for an exercise. I didn't consider it an exercise, but I got a lot of flexibility of my body because of my training sessions with my Kathakali master, which was important for me for Kathakali. I could, turn and bend my body excellently like an acrobat. And now what we know as yoga, also I know, is mainly Swedish acrobatics. Because if you see what is originally written in Veda, the original text of yoga, most of these this yoga postures are not there. That's mainly influenced by one school. About which I have a very long session, 2 hours or something like that, which is available on the internet. I have a speech about yoga. I've been speaking about this also. So I consider this as a body flexibility exercise, and nothing wrong with that. But more than that, there is nothing spiritual in that, is what I understood. And I later did follow yoga. And there was an interview. If you go to my website, sanaledamaruku.com, you can see that the Scandinavian yoga magazine, Ananda, has interviewed me and made a cover story with me in Finnish as well as in English, speaking about my yoga experience. I said, I have nothing against yoga. I would not consider it as a very good exercise. It's an exercise. It's mainly a body flexibility exercise. I'm not interested in flexibility of my body. Now I do a lot of exercises. I'm a regular exerciser. I walk a lot. Even walking is much better an exercise than yoga, is what I understand. But if you want your body to be flexible in the younger years, yoga is a possible thing. But if you don't practice yoga in earlier years, and if you try to do it later, and if you have cervical spondylosis or something like that, you are in trouble. You can have real serious health problems. Also, I have a friend, a Finnish friend, who have practiced yoga and got physically sick. That's another story. I would one day introduce him also in one of my programs. He's a very famous photographer, international reputed photographer, was fascinated with yoga, came to India, and then he did not find a proper guru. He went to Sri Lanka and found a Buddhist monk. And in Kandy, he sat in Padmasana, the posture of crossing the legs, and sat almost an year, except for buying food and other things. And he got his spine damaged with that process. The unnatural postures regularly can damage your body, and he's an example. And then the doctor said, the only way you can do is walk and walk and walk. And he walked Narmada Parikrama 5 times all the time. It's an interesting person. But I know a lot of people who are in the other side of my basic interest. For example, all these people are my friends. I have friends who practice religion. I have friends who practice all these sadhanas. I have friends who go in search of spirituality, because I would find friends not on the basis of their faith, but if there is a good wavelength, one becomes friend. That's how it's it. So I have association with a lot of people who are in the life of spirituality. Will that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you. But I meant by yoga, I meant not just Hatha Yoga. I was referring to either Raj Yoga or Kundalini Yoga. Anyway, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, PJ. That was a beautiful question. And we also got to know something about in general. And we can move on to Zoom, actually.
Yeah, shall we take this question from Ratish in Zoom? Helen, Ratish, please come on.
Sir, good evening.
1 second.
Yeah. So actually, this karma theory, don't you think there is a positive vibe in that? Because it states that if you do a good thing, you'll get back the good thing. If you do a bad thing, the bad thing will come to your life. I'm not talking about the previous life. So don't you think it improve the society in a positive way?
Yeah, well, that's, if that is true, Ratish, that would be wonderful. If I do a good thing, I should get good results. And if anybody does bad things, they should get a bad result. But look at the world order. The world order is very, very brutal, actually. Many people who do not do anything good have sometimes big success in their life. Also, what is success? Success is decided on the basis of not doing good things, but winning things. In nature, you are on a permanent fight to survive, to win over things and adapt. If you're good at that, you are successful. But I would believe that there should be a moral order, as you wish, that if one does good, you should get good things back in your life. If you bad things, you should get bad things in your life. No, it's not like that. But sometimes some people who have done very good, everything, all good in their possibility, but we have seen them suffering at the fag end of their life for a long time. And all this, there is no justice that you see. But that is why we made our own justice. Humans have made their own laws based on the idea of justice that they have. There is no, if there is natural justice happening everywhere, we would not need a judicial system. Naturally, everything, good karma, you get good result. It's not happening. That's why we made our own laws, our own rules, our own interpreters of the justice. So that's an ideal situation, that if you do good and you get good. But if you do bad, it should be the legal system or judiciary would find whether that's good or bad. But success is not coming from good acts, but for the apt acts. Getting the right job is one success. Doing the right business. And what is the success in business? Defeat your competitor, but you are destroying a person by that process, or destroying the people who are working with that. But who will be successful? Who would win over other people? Otherwise, you have to redefine what's success. So if what is success as we understand, who is the successful person? Successful person is winning over other people, is what is the successful person. And sometimes that's not very cool. That's not very comfortable. And when a lion or a tiger chases an antelope, and there is no justice in the whole thing. There is only one justice of hunger. Antelope has one justice of survival. And most of the time, the hunger wins over the survival instinct. So there is no justice there. Nature is so brutal and so cruel. There is not much justice there. Ideal, if there is justice, that's good. Now, there is no justice in nature. That's why we make our own judicial system, our own laws, based on an idea of justice.
Okay, thank you, sir. So can I ask one more question?
Yeah, please.
So I don't know whether it's related to this topic. So how do you define death? How will you define a death situation? What is a death? Well,
that's a very complicated question. A physician should answer it better. And as I understand, life is a continuous process. And that process is what is called life. And if that process is over, we are dead. For example, it can be compared in a beautiful explanation I have read somewhere. It's like, the process of having some fuel and it's burning. And there is the flame. And till the fuel is there, and if all conditions are perfect, the flame is burning. Process of burning is what we call life. And when the fuel is over, or when there is a hard blow of wind or some other things happen, the process of burning is over. So the light is gone. It has not gone anywhere. Where did the flame go? It's just gone into the oblivion. Life is just that process, and we call it life. That's a good explanation that would satisfy to my urge to present it beautifully. But that it's not going in one go also. When we die, we are not dying immediately. Many parts of our body has its own existence. And the hair would grow still 3 more days. The nails will grow still some more time. Even if after your brain goes, your heart, the body will not start dying completely. It takes a long process. So, it's a process of setting down the process of the life.
Okay, so it looks like a spiritual explanation what you're given, I believe.
Well, it's not a spiritual explanation. This explanation was given by Huxley. This is like a burning fire.
Okay.
He was a great scientist. Do you have a better way of presenting what is life? I would say the process of the burning of energy, with all this, structure is continuing. That's what is life. And once it's over, it's done. Well, we talk about it later, but that's out of the context. So I would say thank you very much for these wonderful questions. And these are very enlightening questions and very eye-opening questions, and given me a lot of opportunity to speak on different sides of the whole issue. And thank you very much for wonderful moderation that Wawa and Helen and other people also were doing.